Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 127 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. Today is a fun one. We're going to talk about thievery in Jiu-Jitsu, my favorite thing. Stealing people's ideas, thoughts, all kinds of stuff. You guys are going to really like this episode. I think it's super inspiring, in my opinion. But maybe that's just me. We'll see. We'll see how you guys like it. As always, if you guys like an episode, if you want to let me know on Instagram at the Josh McKinney. Send me a message. I think I respond to everything on there. I don't get a crazy amount of messages. On that note, yes, the podcast is going to be huge one day, but don't think that it is yet. When I was just coaching in Nashville. One of my students told me, man, this guy came up to me and wanted to meet you and wasn't able to because you're crazy and you were bouncing off the walls the entire time while we were in Nashville and coaching people you don't even know. Yes, that's who I am as a person. But at any tournament that you see me at anything that you see me at, I promise I will be super pumped unless I am like walking onto the mat to compete, I will be pumped to hear from you, to hear that you like the show, to hear that the show has helped you in jiu-jitsu. I promise I will be excited about that. I don't hear it as much as you would think that I do. I know you think, man, this show is great. Everybody's got to be telling the guy, he's got to be getting all kinds of listeners. He's probably making all kinds of money. He's caking. Nah, none of those things are true. So definitely. I mean, even if you're listening to this 200 episodes from now, 4 years from now, don't for a second think that I'm jiu-jitsu famous. Think that I think I'm jiu-jitsu famous. Always come up and ask me. Always come up and talk to me. I'm always love doing that. It's very fun for me to get to talk to people that love jiu-jitsu. That's where I'll leave you guys. Let's go ahead and get started on this episode. So when episode 500 comes out, I don't know, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, I hope that people recognize me for what I am, what I want to be for jiu-jitsu. And that hope is the best thief in the history of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And what I mean by that, we talk about in this episode, the title of this episode is how to steal ideas, techniques, or strategies, right? It's really how to get inspired. There is a fun thing where you can kind of define the two as the same thing. I'll give you an example. When I was young, and still to this day, my dad, who's been on the podcast 5 times now, and is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, is also the pastor of a church and has been, I think, since I was 8 years old. There was a point when I was 10, 12, sometime in that area, my dad was preaching week in and week out, and he still does. But you're coming up with this new sermon every single week. And I remember we would drive to school some days and he would be listening to other sermons in the car. And then 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, I would hear in one of his sermons an example or a story that was very, very similar to what we had heard 2 weeks prior in the car from a different pastor. So one day I asked my dad about it. I said, hey, why do you always steal these people's stuff? And, he looked at me and he just said, I don't think that any pastor has an original idea anymore. And it really clicked to me. It really, really resonated because you're not trying to create, if I have time, I have months and I get to think of a 30-minute sermon or just 30-minute lecture. I can make that so much my own, if I really spend a lot of time, if I really focus on it. Now, if I have to do that once a week, I need more inspiration. It is not just going to all be up here. There comes a point, and I really feel this now because I do a weekly episode of the podcast. There comes a point where I will have a plan and I will start trying to talk about something and I will have zero inspiration. It will be an episode that I go, hey, this would probably get a lot of listens. This would have a strong title and it would get a lot of listens. But the problem is, if I'm not enjoying it, if I'm not having fun, I'm not being inspired. And if I'm not being inspired, and this may not be like this for everybody, but I know for sure it is like this for me. If I am not being inspired, if I don't have inspiration, I don't do as well at anything. And we're going to talk about finding inspiration in jiu-jitsu and how to do that in just a second. But the big thing that I want to stress is most of the time, most good ideas are borrowed from someone else and then made your own. Most things, people always have these, this guy stole my idea and then created a company, right? Let's use old Zuck. You know, he's always in the news. And if you guys have ever seen the movie The Social Network or just know the story, he stole the idea of Facebook from someone. But the thing is, he is the guy that invented Facebook. Yeah, it was shady that he was telling them that he was working on it and he wasn't. That's probably just stealing. That's not inspiration. But had he have not done that, that inspiration, it wasn't those guys. If those guys could do it on their own, just like he says in the movie, if you could have invented Facebook, you would have invented Facebook. And it's just like that in martial arts. It's just like that in jiu-jitsu. It's just like that in business, to be honest. So many people come up with great ideas, but that's all that they are. They don't put them into practice, or so many people are naturally really, really good at things. And then they get dissected by someone who's observant, somebody who's good at dissecting things. And they play on it. I'll give you an example. And this is in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you guys listen to the podcast a lot, you've probably heard this example before. But my good friend, Chris Paynes, he talks a lot about his coach, Preet Mickelson. Preet is very famous for one main concept. That's one that's really, there's a lot of really good concepts that this guy has. But there is one main one that he got kind of famous for, at least early on. And it was kind of an idea of guard retention. And it was called the grilled chicken. And if you guys don't know what that is, you should definitely look it up. I think you could just YouTube grilled chicken BJJ and you will find a lot of content on it. But what's really interesting is Chris lives in England. Okay. He teaches this concept of grilled chicken to his students. And so they have good guard retention. And he will tell me stories about how Braulio Estima has a gym 35 minutes, 40 minutes away. And he says every once in a while, one of his guys gets lost and ends up at my gym. And he goes, and when this happens and they can't pass the guard of my students, they go, oh my gosh, your guys' guard retention is so good. What are you guys doing? And Chris said at first his mind was just blown because he goes, we're doing what your coach does. Pete studied Braulio Estima. That is where the grilled chicken retention system came from his study of Braulio. Yet Braulio doesn't even understand, or maybe he does, or maybe he just doesn't teach it. I don't know what that guy does, but Braulio's guys don't know it. That is, without any opinion, that is a fact. His guys will come into Chris's gym and not understand grilled chicken, which came from their coach. Preet was inspired watching somebody's jiu-jitsu, and then he systemized it, and then he made it simpler to understand, and jiu-jitsu became easier. Retention became easier. So how do we use that? Man, that's all I do. I get inspired by certain things and then create podcast episodes about it. And instead of saying like, hey, this is how we should get inspired, I thought I would just reference certain episodes that are known for being my best episodes on the show. Without a doubt, I get more talk, more, I guess, more excitement around the ideas of pacing than almost any other episode. There are a few training method episodes that maybe are even a little bigger, but I think pacing is going to make the most sense because I can tell you exactly where I was when I got inspired for pacing. I can tell you each match that I saw that pacing was really important. And I started to go, okay, I need to define this. No one seems to have defined what it means to pace at 100% and to go hard. And that's what we decided to call blitzing. No one knows, no one seems to have a very good, I never see people teach staying behind the knees, hiding behind the knees, and playing prevent, and just learning how to play prevent jujitsu. I never noticed anyone doing these things. That's why I decided to define them. But the time that I noticed these things happening, of course, I've always known that pace is important, that I can go really hard on some people in certain areas and it gets me the guard pass. But I don't think I ever really comprehended how important until I was at Worlds last year in December. So for those of you who don't know, I lost first round of Worlds. Sucks to suck, right? Luckily, I always say, luckily, my name of my podcast isn't the I'm Great at Jiu-Jitsu show, because that would have sucked even worse, right? But I got to sit down and watch. I got to sit down and get inspired by the best gi grapplers in the world. So the first match, this is really when I started to notice it. There were a lot of other concepts that I would try to pull from this person's game. But you know what? Actually, I lied. Let's not go into that one yet. Let's just talk about pacing right now, because when I start to talk about Renato Canuto, there are other concepts that he uses that we will need to define, that I will show you the inspiration that I got from him and episodes that have been created that probably you enjoyed, and who it came from and how I was inspired by these people. But the first one was, oh crap, I don't remember. Is it Fabricio Andre? I think that's his name. The guy that beat Shane Jamil Hill in the finals of Worlds last year. And what was interesting, I watched every match and I was pretty good about guessing who was going to win matches. I don't think I got every match right, but there were very few that I got just absolutely wrong. And this was one that I got absolutely wrong. Shane Jamil Hill had the better jiu-jitsu. Watch the tournament. Watch their matches. Technical jiu-jitsu. Flow. Smooth flow. Shane was on fire that day. I couldn't imagine him losing. But if you watch that match was won because of a blitz. It was just a very well-timed blitz. Fabricio went out, and I'm pretty sure, I hope it was Fabricio Andre that won this, but he went out and got to a super quick guard pull, got to a super quick triangle, just went out and blitzed, went really hard, really quickly. And the pace wasn't there yet for Shane. He wasn't able to respond to the pace quick enough before he ended up in a triangle. It was simply pace. And I remember watching this match and going, oh my gosh, he just beat him. He just beat Shane. Shane's so good. And he just went really hard and triangled him. That's bizarre. And then there were a few other matches that this really mattered. Let's look at prevent. Now we'll look at Renato. So Renato was the first guy that not only used the blitz well, but also used prevent well. And we talk about prevent. You create time loops, right? You try to win the time battle of the match when you're playing prevent. You're trying to waste your opponent's energy, and you're also trying to get them frustrated. And then when it's time to go, it's very hard for them to adjust from the pace of, I have to keep attacking this guy because he's just playing defensive, to, well, now I need to defend. It is so hard when you're going with somebody, especially for a 10-minute fight, and they keep doing that to you over and over. And like, you don't know when they're going to attack hard and when they're going to go soft and really easy on you. And it's very confusing. But I think you look at Worlds, I don't think anyone did that better than Renato Canuto. Is his first world championship that he won. And I think that there have been times that he's had some of the best jiu-jitsu in his division and been one of the best competitors, one of the best athletes, but he's never gotten to put it all together and win the world title. This year he did. And I think his understanding of pacing was better than it ever has been. I would say to distance management and angles that honestly, so much you want a match to get inspired by. Watch the strategy behind Hanato Canuto and Levi Jones Leary. When you watch them at Worlds last year, Hanato does a really good job of not getting connected where he doesn't want to get connected, hiding behind the knees. And then he also uses something different. This is what I would call kind of a level 2 prevent. And I haven't defined this on the show. I don't think I've ever defined any level 2 of any concept that I have on the show. I think all those long episodes on distance management and pacing, all of those are just level 1 concepts. But like a level 2 concept on prevent is the ability to use distance in your prevent. And so when you're too close and they shouldn't let you be that close, just being able to hug and keep that position. Or when you're too close and you don't want to be that close, being able to exit the position, being able to create excessive distance. That is going to be one of the most important defining factors of prevents is your ability to manage distance, especially when you're on top. It's a little harder to play prevents on bottom without tying somebody up, right? But if you tie somebody up in De La Hiva and close guard and spider guard, you should, in theory, as long as you're keeping them there, you're winning the distance battle. So I guess it does apply on both sides. So I was wrong on that, but that's exactly why I don't have an episode on level 2 prevent yet. It's because it's not all defined yet. But those definitions, those inspirations, that is where my thinking of jiu-jitsu comes from. A lot of people like the show, and I'll even do interviews on other podcasts, and they'll say, hey, you have this unique way of looking at jiu-jitsu. You have this fresh way of looking at jiu-jitsu. And really, all that is saying that I suck at jiu-jitsu. That's it. That is what my mentality that makes me have different ideas and be able to explain things to you guys differently than maybe anyone else you've ever heard. It is because I don't go in with a black belt mentality that I know everything. So many black belts do this, but then you get around other ones. You get around guys that seem to always be getting better at jiu-jitsu. And you look at what they do. One of the biggest things that they do is they get inspired. And there are other ways to get inspired besides just watching matches. That was kind of what we talked about in the first part of this. Obviously, this episode wasn't, I don't have like bullet points, so I'm kind of everywhere, but people tend to like these better than when I do have bullet points and I'm a little more focused because I'm just inspired and I'm just going crazy, right? So the next idea with inspiration is asking the right questions. I can get inspired by my white belts. Does not mean I'm learning from my white belts. Yes, I get it. It does mean I'm learning from my white belts, but it doesn't mean not in the normal jiu-jitsu sense, right? The normal jiu-jitsu sense is this: one guy knows and one guy doesn't. And so the guy that knows teaches the guy that doesn't. And now they both know. The problem with that mentality is the guy that knows, in most gyms, the head coach, they just keep what they know. They don't add to it. They don't tweak their concepts. They don't tweak their ideas. If I went through and redid every episode of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, I deleted this podcast and said, I'm going to make the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show 2.0, and I'm going to do like every topic that I covered, I'm going to redo. And every interview that I did, I'm going to redo. It would be totally different. The show would be a completely different show. And that is not to say that I was wrong then. I was not wrong with those ideas. They just weren't finished yet. They just weren't complete yet. That's why I always love to do levels of my ideas, right? Levels of distance management, because I usually will explain the first level and people will be like, whoa, this is amazing. And then I go, do you want to know level 2? And their mind explodes, right? Because no, there can't be more to this than I already know, right? I didn't even know about this. That is what is really fun. That is what's really important when we are learning jiu-jitsu, is never thinking of something as complete. When I was a purple belt, I finished like 70 something percent of my matches in total, not just the matches that I won, but in total by triangle. I would pretty much either triangle people or lose. I know more about the triangle now, have a better understanding, can teach it better, probably 100 times more than I could as a purple belt. I'm a better coach now. I just have a better understanding. I can apply it to other things that I understand really well, like the idea of elbow knee space. I understand that so much better. Yes, I could create elbow knee space and I could triangle guys. I didn't have a ton of definition on that, though. I didn't really understand the why, which made it hard to teach. It made it hard for me to really know. If we're getting good at jiu-jitsu, we need repetition and we need understanding. And so many people get repetition, but so few people have understanding. And then a lot of times, the people that have understanding, they become these outliers of jiu-jitsu, and then they don't get their repetition because they're able to just use understanding to beat most people, right? In my opinion, of stealing ideas and techniques and thoughts, I think that it is a really, really good idea to have both, to focus on understanding and focus on repetition. There are all kinds of different ways to get your repetition. In just a few weeks, I don't want to give you guys an exact date yet because the month is going to be very busy for me completing everything. And then I also have a telethon that you guys should check out. I'll give you more information on that next week. This is a non-for-profit thing that has zero to do with jiu-jitsu. Not zero. One of my purple belts is doing one of my purple belt females is doing like a self-defense part of this telethon. So that'll be fun. Hopefully she'll use me and throw me around a little bit. So that'll be fun. But I'll give you guys more information on that. Maybe even at the end of the episode, once I look up the date and time and all that stuff. But I have to work on both of those things, and including the how to train jiu-jitsu instructional. And I don't know if I've told you guys about this. I've told some people about it, but it's always hard to remember what I told you guys on the podcast. We're going to go with 7 days to suck less sometime, hopefully in May. I plan on sometime like the May 23rd range, doing 7 episodes in a row, 7 days to suck less. And they're going to be 7 episodes. They're either going to be, I talked about how there are episodes I wish I could redo. That's what we're going to do. We're going to do 7 episodes. We're going to either talk about some new ideas, because there are some new training methods that are going to come out that, in my opinion, I don't think anyone knows. There are people that do things like it, but there aren't people that have defined it and defined the reasons to use these training methods and who should be using these training methods. So that is going to be, basically, it's going to be a combo in the video instructional How to Train Jiu-Jitsu and in the free ebook, the 3 lenses. And these are going to both come out whenever we start on the 7 days to suck less. We're going to do 7 days, and those are going to be only ads run on those days, is letting you guys know about this cool thing that we have that is going to change the way that you train jiu-jitsu, and probably change the way that jiu-jitsu is trained in the Midwest, and hopefully change the way that jiu-jitsu is trained, period. And I think that these are really basic, like level 1 thoughts that we're going to go through, but I don't think a lot of people are there yet in their jiu-jitsu training, are at level 1 and understand, I am trying to get better. Every time I'm on the mat, here is how I can do it. There's just not enough definition. There is just not enough. And I can tell you without a doubt, I don't think there's probably an original idea in the entire book. I think most things were stolen through inspiration. Obviously, I believe that those ideas have been thought through much further than a lot of people have gotten them, but that'll be for you guys to decide. We'll get more on that later. Back to inspiration. So now inspiration through questions. I told you guys I learned from my white belts, and I think I learned from anybody, or can learn from anybody. One of the best ways to do that is to ask questions. And what you're looking for when you're asking questions about jiu-jitsu, I guess you can look for anything. But I think one of the most valuable things to look for is the thought process behind it. So if I'm teaching you a knee cut, and then you ask me something along the lines of, well, what are you thinking in this position? What tells you when to go for the knee cut? Are there times that it gets stopped? Do people usually, what idea, what thought process beats this position? If someone was knee cutting you, how would you think to defend it? When you do that, you create so much more inspiration. You create so much more understanding than if I say, okay, sit there, I'm going to teach you a knee cut. Then whether or not you understand is just dependent on how good of a teacher I am, how good of an instructor I am. If you learn to ask questions, even if somebody's a terrible instructor, you get better. Me and one of my black belts, me and Eric Hebner, were talking about this literally 2 days ago. He goes, there are certain guys that I actually love it when they ask me about my techniques. He goes, because then they start asking me all kinds of follow-up questions. And he goes, and I leave with a better understanding of what I'm doing, right? Because they don't understand. So they just ask, they ask and they ask. And then by the end of it, we both understand more. That is how to get good at jiu-jitsu. That is the I suck mentality is that. It's not a mentality where you say, oh, I suck at jiu-jitsu. It's just a mentality where you say, I am not perfect at jiu-jitsu. I could learn probably about any position and any idea, and I could learn deeper that way. With that mentality, you're kind of unstoppable. So now let's look at strategies and training methods. How do you steal those? One of the best ways to steal training methods is to start a podcast. If you guys listen to my podcast, you have heard so many people, you've heard me ask so many people, how do you suck less at jiu-jitsu? And it's really, for most of them, they gave us some type of idea of training. They gave us some type of idea. The biggest thing was consistency, without a doubt. As a whole, consistency trumped everything. But still, we got different training methods. We got different ideas from one question that we asked a bunch of guys. This is my first time doing this. This wasn't the first time doing it as a podcast. When I was a purple belt, I talk about this in my book. What was that called? Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu. Oh yeah. I named it my entire business off of that. Yes, my book, Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu. I talk about how there was a time where I was losing a lot. And I probably sent 50 messages. Basically, any black belt or school owner that I knew, I just said, hey, I'm struggling. What are you doing to get better at jiu-jitsu? That was really the first, the defining step for me that changed how I thought about jiu-jitsu, because I got 50 different answers and I was looking for the one. I was looking for the one answer. Which one of these is going to change things for us? Which one of these is going to matter? And guess what? There wasn't one. There were like 50. 50 of them were the right answer. These were the ways that these guys were getting better at jiu-jitsu. Are there ones that are more efficient? Are there ones that are better? Of course, I had to, and I always tell you guys to do this. Just like with anything I talk about on the show, test it. See if it works for you, because it might just be something that works for me. I am not a scientist. I know that sometimes it comes off on the podcast that I just know better. And I don't think that you or I should think that way. I think that you should take my ideas on the podcast and let them inspire you. They don't just have to be the way that I talk about them. You can define them. You can make them better. You can make them just more specific to you and your training situation and your jiu-jitsu team and your jiu-jitsu goals. You don't have to take everything at face value in jiu-jitsu. So often people just don't know what they're doing. Not that they're not doing good, but they don't know what they are doing. It's very hard for them to explain to you the thought process behind the strategy that they use in a round. Something that's really interesting. I point this out to some people, and it's a bit racist, but Brazilians generally understand strategy a lot better than Americans do in jiu-jitsu. They seem to really grasp that it is about winning. It isn't about winning in a specific way. They grasp that it is a game. Yes, we're trying to fight. We're doing jiu-jitsu, but it is a game. And the object of the game is to win. And a lot of times strategy is just part of jujitsu to those people. I feel like when you say those people, it sounds offensive. Everything else I think I said before that wasn't racist, but those people might have not, shouldn't have said that. But when you go with the Brazilian people, they tend to be really good at using strategy, even in a round. People that understand strategy, that understand when to go and when not to go, and where to be and where not to be, and when to be there and when not to be there. People that understand that, they tend to grasp jiu-jitsu as a whole better. But until that was defined, until somebody started saying, hey, people are using strategy. And I want to say probably one of the first people I heard about talking about strategy was Keenan. He just said, if I'm going to win, it's not just, if I'm going to win at the highest level, it's not just about being the best technician. And he wanted it to be about being the best technician. I feel the same way. I want it to be about understanding and technique, but it's not. These guys are athletes. And so if someone is more of an athlete than you, even if they have a little less technique and a little less understanding, sometimes you still lose if you don't know how to strategize against the athlete. So when we are doing jiu-jitsu, when we are looking at jiu-jitsu, we are trying to look at every little part and see where we get inspired. So when I'm watching a match, maybe I am thinking a lot about grip fighting. And so all I watch in that match, I watch somebody who's good at grip fighting. All I'll watch is what's he doing with his hands. Oh, I notice every time that this guy grabs cross collar off of his back, the response is to grab his tricep with the same side arm. And it seems like that kills that cross collar grip, and it makes it easy to start to close the distance and pass the guard. And I see that over and over, and I see so many guys do it. But then I even see guys not do it and not get the guard pass. So I can start to go, okay, I've been inspired by that grip. That tricep grip is important. I wonder if it works from bottom too. I wonder if it works from stand up too. Wonder if this is just a good grip fighting response to every time somebody grabs cross collar. From mount, it wasn't a good idea. He armbarred me, right? It lifted my arm up. So I can't do it from there, but other places I can. That is how you get inspired doing jiu-jitsu. You could do footwork too. I always talk about Gordon and Hoffa are the guys I always like to watch for footwork. Hanato Canuto, we talked about him. He could also be that guy too. But when it comes to guard passing, and really just comes up being on top, it seems like nobody has better footwork than those three guys. I'm sure there are people I'm forgetting, but that I like to watch. And instead of going, well, what guard passes are these guys doing? You say, what are their feet doing? And why are they doing it? And then I say, oh, that's interesting. Gordon steps here. So does Hoffa. So does Hanato. That's got to be important. I wonder why they step there. And then you break down what that foot position does. When you look at jiu-jitsu this way, when you break it down into parts and then you start to get inspired, your progression kind of becomes unstoppable. I can progress. I told you guys when we were doing the blitz and the prevent episodes, a lot of the distance management ideas were coming from other sports. I was watching striking arts. I was watching football. I was watching I was watching all kinds of different things and trying to get inspired on distance management. Who manages the distance better? Why is it important? And I'm watching, of course, jiu-jitsu videos, watching, of course, technique videos, and of course, YouTubing distance management. You just get obsessed with this. You get inspired by it, right? That is what inspiration does, is it makes you want to do something. Sometimes you might get inspired by an I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu episode, and maybe you don't. Maybe for 10 weeks, 20 weeks, you don't. And then all of a sudden there's an episode and it's an interview and a guy talks about something really, really, really specific, but it applies to you and it clicks. And you were just paying attention at the right time, but now you are inspired and you're going to take that one paragraph that this guy gave, whether he talked about, let's say he talked about Wim Hof breathing. I had Miles Lucas on the podcast a while ago at this point, but he talked about Wim Hof breathing throughout the whole entire episode, just talked about breathing exercises and things like that. And what I had, what happened with me was that inspired me. And I'm sure other people had inspired them. And yeah, it was an hour of content. Maybe 30 minutes of that was on Wim Hof breathing. But in that little bit, maybe one sentence inspired me. Maybe he said, "You won't get tired anymore." And it clicked. I go, okay, I've got to figure this out. I've got to learn this. And then it sends me on a 6-month journey where I'm just trying to get good at Wim Hof breathing. I'm just trying to figure it out. That's what inspiration is. That's what inspiration does. And if you are good at it, if you are open, if you are willing to, you will find that almost anything can inspire you to get better at jiu-jitsu. And almost anything can inspire you to define your focus a little more. Almost anything. And that, I think, is where we'll probably leave. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I was supposed to talk about or think about when it comes to inspiration. I don't think that there is. I guess I will leave you with this: how to get inspired. Go in with an open mind and find what you like to do. We always talk about on the show, think fun first. So when it comes to inspiration, if you don't like watching competitive jiu-jitsu matches, first, you should either figure out a way to make yourself like them. Find somebody that you do like in competitive jiu-jitsu. They don't even have to be the best guy, but just somebody, maybe you like their story, you like their personality, you like their jiu-jitsu. And you say, I kind of want to get inspired by that. You don't have to say, I want my game to be like his, because it's not your game anymore, right? If you just focus on trying to be somebody else, if you just focus on trying to be Josh McKinney's jiu-jitsu, you're going to probably be discouraged, because there are certain things that I can get away with because of hip flexibility. There are certain things that I can get away with because of strength. There are certain things that I can get away with because of my height, my weight, whatever, right? There are these physical characteristics that maybe you don't have, and it wouldn't be as efficient to just play Josh McKinney's jiu-jitsu. Now, if you said, I'm going to get inspired by Josh McKinney's jiu-jitsu, I like that he plays this, I like that he does that, that is much easier. That is much more doable. And I think that is when you're looking at these things, you want to make them fun for you. But if you try and you look for guys to like, and then eventually you get to a point, you go, maybe I just don't like watching jiu-jitsu, just footage. I don't like to watch competitive footage. I don't get inspired by that. Then you stop watching. You do something else. It's a waste of your time if it is not inspiring you, if it's not making you better. If you listen to the podcast and that is what inspires you, go back on other episodes. Listen to episodes you haven't heard. Listen to episodes that maybe spark your interest. Maybe they inspire you just from the title and you go, oh, this could be it, right? But instead of looking at things like we're in a classroom all the time, and I give you a list of 5 things to do, and then you do all those 5 things, and maybe they work for you, maybe they don't. Like, I'm a human. I'm creating a list off of just what I know. Unless if you went in and said, okay, I'm going to look at this list and look at this idea, and then the parts of it that are fun, I'm going to put even more focus into, and the parts that aren't, life's too short. I don't want to do those things. Like if you look at jiu-jitsu that way, if you look at getting inspired that way, jiu-jitsu progression not only becomes easy, but since you are thinking fun first, it's always fun. And honestly, I don't know if it's like this for you guys, but I do jiu-jitsu because it is fun, not because I have a podcast, not because I have 2 gyms, not because I have a production company in jiu-jitsu. Those things are businesses. Those things are art projects that I enjoy, but they are not jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is when I get to roll. Jiu-jitsu is when I get to teach. It's when I get to really be on the mat and do jiu-jitsu. And for me, my only reason for doing jiu-jitsu is because I love it. It's because it's fun. It's my passion. It inspires me to do things off the mat. It inspires me so much to try to contribute back to jiu-jitsu. That is why I like to do this podcast, is because I do believe that one day people are going to look back and say, hey, these ways of thinking of jiu-jitsu are very helpful. They inspire me. And maybe you take that inspiration and you change the face of jiu-jitsu. And that would be awesome. That's why I'm doing it. And I think that's why a lot of people do it. But that's what I'll leave you guys with is get inspired and think fun first. Have a great day, guys. And that is the episode. You guys probably noticed there was no deal with Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu this week. You guys were probably so discouraged that there was no deal with Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu this week. And there probably won't be until we do the 7 Days to Suck Less. I just am trying to put everything towards that, and then all commercial space just be telling you guys about the 7 Days to Suck Less. If I had to guess a start date, I would say May 23rd. I can't say for sure that is going to be the start date. But if I had to guess, if you put a gun to my head and you said, Josh, you've got to guess, and if you're wrong, I still won't shoot you, then I would be comfortable saying May 23rd. If you said, then I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, you would shoot me. I probably wouldn't guess at all. But that's just me. That's just what I do. Yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys liked this one. I hope this episode was inspiring for you. I would love to hear from you guys, as always. If you have some information about a time you were inspired by jiu-jitsu, especially a time you were inspired by this show, I would love to hear from you. You could email me, josh@simplifyingjujitsu.com. I have created like pen pals on that email of people that will talk about stuff, maybe talk about stuff that I can't talk about or don't talk about on the show, and get my opinions on things like that, and just fun conversations. So always shoot me an email when I get time. I like to respond to them. And that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys have a great day. Hope you're inspired. And I hope that today's episode helps you suck just a little less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.